My name is Vanessa Blake. I am 35 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed I had built something safe. My world revolved around my two children, Sophie, 8, and Caleb, 4. I worked part-time as a translator, the kind of job that fit neatly between school pickups and bedtime stories, allowing me to be present for them. Our house in the Denver suburbs always smelled faintly of chalk from the driveway drawings and pancakes on Saturday mornings. From the outside, it was the picture of ordinary happiness. Neighbors would smile at us in the yard and say we were that family, the one that had it all together. Inside, I kept the engine running. The laundry, the lunches, the dentist appointments, the midnight rocking of sick children, I carried it all. I did it because I loved them. I did it because I believed in the man I had married. Eric Blake. My husband was the kind of man who knew how to smile at the dinner table and make people believe he was reliable. He provided, he said thank you, he even brought flowers once in a while. I thought that was enough. I thought love didn't need fireworks to be real. And then one ordinary Tuesday, everything I thought I knew was torn away. I was driving home from a notary's office, my car full of grocery bags and paperwork, when I passed Eric's workplace. He was standing outside, hands in his pockets, the late afternoon sun catching on his suit. I almost waved. But then a woman walked up to him, tall, confident in a black coat and heels that clicked sharply against the pavement. Without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't the kind of kiss you could mistake. It was practiced casual, like two people who had done it 100 times. My breath stopped. My hands clutched the steering wheel until the leather creaked. Eric wrapped his arms around her, smiling, and then led her to his car. They drove off together while I sat frozen, my world collapsing in silence. I still had 20 minutes before I had to pick up Sophie from school. 20 minutes to decide whether I was imagining things or whether my marriage had just shattered. I swallowed hard, blinked back tears, and drove on. Motherhood doesn't pause for heartbreak. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, I walked into the kitchen. Eric was there scrolling on his phone, a plate of reheated lasagna in front of him. He looked up, smiled. "Hey, love, you okay?" I wanted to scream, to throw the plate across the room, but my voice came out low and steady. "Eric, is there something you want to tell me?" His smile faltered. "About what?" "I saw you today, outside your office. I saw the woman. The kiss. Who is she?" For a moment, the silence was so thick I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Then he set his fork down. His voice was calm, too calm. "Her name is Melissa. She's a colleague. We've been seeing each other for a few months." The words landed like knives. I couldn't breathe. "And you didn't think your wife, the mother of your children, deserved to know?" He rubbed his face with his hands, frustrated. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't walk away from her either." It was like my body went cold from the inside out. "You want to keep both of us," I whispered. "I raise your children while she gets your lunches and your hotel rooms." "I don't want a divorce," he said, locking eyes with me. "The kids need a stable home." "No," I replied, shaking now with fury. "What they need is a father who doesn't lie. A father who doesn't bring another woman into their mother's life behind her back." His jaw tightened, and then came the blow I didn't see coming. "Melissa's pregnant." The room spun. Pregnant. My knees nearly gave out, but I held onto the counter, my heart screaming inside my chest. "You cheated on me, and now she's pregnant, and you expect me to keep playing house like nothing happened." He said nothing, only muttered, "I'm sorry, but I'm not leaving her either. I can't." And in that moment, something inside me broke, something that would never heal back the same way again. I straightened my voice, shaking but firm. "Then you've made this easy. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." Eric's expression hardened. "You do that and you'll regret it. I'll take the kids, the house. You won't walk away with much. Think carefully, Vanessa." Tears blurred my eyes, but my spine stayed straight. "Don't threaten me. Try to take my children and you'll see exactly what I'm capable of." I turned, walked upstairs, and closed the door behind me. For the first time in years, I knew the truth. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his opponent. And the fight had only just begun. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a chest heavy as stone. My children stirred in their rooms, their voices carrying the simple joy of a new day. Sophie was humming while brushing her hair, Caleb calling out for cereal. I smiled at them, but inside I was breaking. Children deserve to believe their home is safe even when the walls are crumbling. I drove them to school, kissed their cheeks, and watched them run inside. As soon as they disappeared, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, my college friend Rachel, now a family attorney. My voice trembled as I explained everything, and when I finished, there was a pause. "Vanessa," she said finally, "you need to prepare yourself. Eric will fight dirty, but if you're willing to stand strong, I'll stand with you. We'll protect your kids and we'll protect what's yours." Her words steadied me. By the time I reached her office later that day, my fear had turned into something sharper: resolve. Rachel laid out the basics: documentation, custody petitions, financial statements. "The most important thing," she said, leaning forward, "is evidence. You saw him with her, but we need proof for court. Do you have any?" I shook my head. "Not yet, but I know where to find it." That night, after Eric left for a late meeting, I checked his desk. Tucked beneath insurance forms and bills was a hotel receipt. 2 nights downtown, booked under Melissa's name. My hands shook as I snapped photos, every click of my phone a reminder that the truth was no longer hidden. Days passed like a blur of paperwork, whispered phone calls, and sleepless nights. Eric acted like nothing had changed, laughing with the kids, asking what was for dinner, while his phone lit up with messages from her. Sometimes I wanted to grab it and scream, but I kept silent, collecting evidence, waiting for the moment to strike. Then came the day he'd turned the children into weapons. I was in the kitchen when Sophie wandered in, her little brow furrowed. "Mommy," she asked, "Daddy says maybe we'll live with him more and maybe with his friend too. Is that true?" The air left my lungs. My daughter, 8 years old, was being groomed to accept a mistress as part of her family. I knelt down, fighting tears, and pulled her close. "Sweetheart, don't worry about that. You will always live with me. No one is taking you away." That night I confronted him. "How dare you talk to Sophie about custody behind my back?" He shrugged, pouring himself a drink. "She deserves to know the truth. Kids are resilient. They'll get used to Melissa." I slammed my hand on the counter, my voice shaking. "Melissa is not their mother. And if you think you can strip me out of their lives, you're more delusional than I thought." He smiled bitterly. "The courts love stability, Vanessa. You don't work full-time." "I do. They'll see me as the provider." I stared at him, rage boiling. "The courts also love mothers who never left their children's side. Do you really want to drag Sophie and Caleb into this?" His silence was answer enough. The weeks crawled by until finally the first court hearing arrived. I wore a navy suit, my father's pendant around my neck, and walked into that sterile courtroom with Rachel at my side. Eric sat across from me, Melissa perched beside him like she already belonged. She was visibly pregnant now, her hand resting protectively over her belly, her lips curled in a smug smile. When the judge called us forward, Eric's lawyer painted him as a loyal father, simply seeking a fair division of time and resources. Then came the attack. My client's wife has grown emotionally unstable since the death of her father, making rash decisions that could harm the children's well-being. I felt my cheeks burn. Grief turned into ammunition in their hands. But Rachel rose, her voice calm, her words sharp as steel. "Your Honor, what my client has suffered is not instability, it is betrayal. And we have evidence that Mr. Blake has been conducting an extramarital affair while attempting to manipulate custody in favor of his mistress." Gasps rippled through the room. Melissa's hand froze on her stomach. Eric shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Rachel smiled faintly and opened the folder we had prepared: hotel receipts, photographs, phone records. She laid them out one by one, the sound of paper echoing in the silence. Eric's jaw tightened. Melissa's face went pale. But Rachel wasn't finished. "And Your Honor, this is only the beginning. We have requested a key witness to appear at the next hearing, someone who can speak directly to Mr. Blake's conduct and his mistress's role in this matter." I looked at Eric then. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. The judge nodded. "Very well. The court will reconvene in 1 week. Witness testimony will be heard." As we left the courtroom, Melissa grabbed Eric's arm, whispering furiously. Their faces were tight, panicked. My heart pounded. They didn't know who the witness was, and that uncertainty was eating them alive. I walked out into the sunlight, the air sharp and bright, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the ground steady beneath me. The battle wasn't over, but the war had begun to turn. The week between hearings stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Every morning I woke before dawn, my mind racing through strategies, fears, and the face of my children as they slept peacefully, unaware of the war being waged over them. I had to keep the house calm routines intact, pancakes on Saturdays, bedtime stories every night. But beneath the surface, my resolve hardened. Eric grew colder by the day. He would drop the kids off from school and linger in the driveway, glaring at me through the windshield before peeling off with tires squealing. Once he hissed at me under his breath while Sophie held my hand. "This isn't going to end the way you think." Melissa, meanwhile, started showing up at the school. She never approached me directly, but I saw her standing at the edge of the playground, her belly rounding beneath expensive dresses, her smile thin and rehearsed. Once Sophie tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Why is Daddy's friend always here?" My heart clenched, but I forced a smile. "She won't always be, sweetheart. Don't worry." Rachel Eversteady helped me prepare for the second hearing. "We need your witness to be more than just credible," she said, tapping her pen on her notepad. "They have to make the court see through Eric's lies. They have to break the illusion he's building." I nodded, my palms sweaty, because I already knew who the witness would be. And if everything went as planned, their testimony would rip apart Eric's facade in one stroke. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table, the house dark papers spread around me. The letter my father had left me before he passed lay folded beside my coffee mug. His words echoed in my mind. "Protect what is yours. Don't let anyone disguise their greed as love." When morning came, I dressed with shaking hands, pulling my hair into a braid and fastening my father's pendant around my neck once more. Sophie hugged me tightly, before school, her small voice whispering, "Good luck, Mommy." Caleb blew me a kiss. I carried their love like armor into the courthouse. Inside, the atmosphere was different this time. Reporters had caught wind of the case, their cameras flashing as we walked through the marble lobby. Eric looked polished, as though he had rehearsed his every move, Melissa clinging to his arm like a trophy. But beneath their smiles, I saw cracks, tension pulling at the corners of their mouths, the quick glances they exchanged. The judge called us to order. Eric's lawyer began with a speech about family stability and the importance of paternal involvement. He spoke of Melissa as though she were already part of the children's lives, painting her as a saintly figure who only wanted the best for Sophie and Caleb. My stomach turned at every word. Then Rachel rose, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "Your Honor, my client requests to call her witness." The judge nodded. "Bring them in." The doors at the back opened and the sound of heels clicked against the floor. The entire courtroom turned. Eric stiffened. Melissa's face drained of color. It was Eric's former business partner, Jonathan Hale. Jonathan, tall and composed, walked to the stand with a folder in his hands. He had once been Eric's closest ally at the firm until they'd had a mysterious falling out last year. Now, as he raised his hand to take the oath, Eric's knuckles whitened against the table. Rachel began the questioning gently. "Mr. Hale, could you tell the court how long you've known Mr. Blake?" "10 years, Jonathan replied. "We built the firm together." "And what was the cause of your professional separation?" Jonathan's eyes flicked toward Eric before settling on the judge. "Financial misconduct." Eric was diverting funds from client accounts into a private account shared with Melissa Carter. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Melissa's lips parted, her hand flying to her stomach. Eric's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection unsubstantiated, but Rachel was ready. She held up documents Jonathan had provided: bank transfers, emails, timestamps. One by one, she laid them before the judge. "These are verified records," she said calmly, "and they show not only an affair, but deliberate theft." The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Hale, are you prepared to testify that these funds were diverted knowingly by Mr. Blake?" Jonathan's voice was steady. "Yes, Your Honor," I warned him. He ignored me. When I threatened to go to the board, he forced me out. And now he is trying to build a new life funded by betrayal, not just of his wife, but of his clients. The room buzzed with murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. Eric sat frozen, his face pale, Melissa clutching his arm with trembling fingers. I watched them both. my heart hammering, but for the first time in weeks, I felt powerful. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about character, about corruption, about the mask Eric had worn finally being ripped away. When Jonathan stepped down from the stand, the silence that followed was deafening. The judge's expression was unreadable, but the shift in the air was undeniable. Eric and Melissa were no longer in control of the narrative. As we left the courtroom that day, Eric refused to meet my eyes. Melissa walked quickly, her heels clicking too fast, her face hidden behind dark glasses. And I walked out into the light, my children's faces flashing in my mind, knowing the fight was far from over. But victory was finally within reach. The courthouse felt colder on the day of the final hearing, though the spring sun outside was bright and warm. I walked through the heavy wooden doors with Rachel at my side, her briefcase clasped like a shield. I had learned by now that these walls carried both justice and betrayal, and whichever one I left with would shape the rest of my life. Eric was already there, seated stiffly at the plaintiff's table. Melissa perched beside him, her dress stretched around her swelling belly, her face pale but defiant. They whispered furiously to each other until the bailiff called the room to order. When the judge entered, silence fell like a stone. The proceedings began with Eric's attorney, his tone clipped and desperate. He argued that Jonathan Hale's testimony was a personal vendetta, that the financial records were taken out of context. He painted Melissa as an innocent bystander, a woman carrying new life, unfairly dragged into a bitter divorce. I watched him talk, my jaw set. Lies dressed up in courtroom polish. Then Rachel rose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Calmly, she laid out the evidence again. The bank transfers, the receipts, the hotel bookings, the photographs. She reminded the judge that Jonathan had nothing to gain by coming forward, that risking his reputation only proved his credibility. She spoke of my devotion to Sophie and Caleb, my years of consistent care, the stability of our home. Every word was a stone laid carefully into the foundation of truth. When she finished, the judge leaned back in his chair, hands folded. The silence stretched long, broken only by the scratch of reporters' pens. Then he turned to Eric. "Mr. Blake, do you wish to address the court directly?" Eric stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with shaking hands. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I admit mistakes were made. I admit I hurt my wife. But I love my children. They need both parents. I only want to provide for them." It might have sounded convincing if not for the tremor in his voice, the sheen of sweat on his brow. I remembered the way he had sneered at me weeks ago, whispering that I would regret leaving him. I remembered Sophie's small voice asking if Melissa would be living with them. Love wasn't what drove him, it was control. The judge's gaze slid to Melissa. "Ms. Carter, do you have anything to add?" She swallowed hard, then forced a smile. "I only want what's fair. I never wanted to replace anyone. I just want Eric to be happy." Her words hung in the air like perfume, sweet but suffocating. Rachel rose one last time. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "Your Honor, my client isn't asking for revenge. She's asking for protection. Protection of her children, her home, and the legacy entrusted to her by her late father. This case is not about punishing infidelity. It's about exposing deception and ensuring two innocent children are not forced into instability at the whim of a man and his mistress." The judge removed his glasses, set them on the bench, and leaned forward. "I've heard enough." The air thickened. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat echoing like a drum. "In the matter of custody," he said, his voice firm, "the court grants primary custody to Mrs. Vanessa Blake. Mr. Blake will have visitation supervised until further review." Eric's head jerked up, his mouth opening in protest, but the judge continued. "As for financial conduct, the evidence of misconduct presented is being referred to the district attorney's office for investigation. This court will not allow fraud to be masked as family obligation." The gavel struck, final, irrevocable. For a moment I couldn't move. Relief crashed through me so hard my knees nearly gave way. I closed my eyes, tears spilling over my father's words, echoing in my heart. "Protect what is yours." Eric turned to me, his face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Melissa clutched his arm, her face white as paper. But his threat slid off me like water. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I walked out of that courtroom taller than I had entered. The reporters swarmed, their questions buzzing, but I kept moving, Rachel shielding me with her steady presence. Outside, the sunlight was warm on my face. I inhaled deeply, the air crisp, clean, alive. That evening, I returned home to Sophie and Caleb. They ran into my arms, their laughter like music, their trust a balm against every wound. I knelt in the living room, holding them close, and whispered, "We're okay now. We're safe." The weeks that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. Eric's calls grew fewer until they stopped altogether. Melissa vanished from the schoolyard. The house settled into peace again, the hum of bedtime routines, the smell of pancakes on Saturdays, the sound of chalk on the driveway. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Sometimes at night, when the house was still, I would sit by the window and think of everything I had endured. Betrayal, humiliation, fear, but also strength I never knew I had. And I realized something my father must have always known: justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the quiet endurance of those who refuse to break. If you've listened to me this far, thank you. If my story touched you, I ask you to like this video, share it with someone who might need courage, and subscribe for more stories where truth rises above lies. And please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story of resilience, because none of us should walk through betrayal alone.